The black horse, economic constraint. Revelation 6:5 and 6. And when he, that is the Lamb, opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature saying, Come and see. And I looked, and behold, there was a black horse, and the one who was sitting upon it had scales in his hand. And I heard something like a voice in the middle of the four living creatures saying, A quart of flour for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and don't even trouble yourself over the oil and the wine. The black horse symbolizes the trend of extreme economic controls, scarcity and constraint. As in the case of the second horseman, so also here a goodly portion of the hardship described will result from the series of aggressive wars and internal dislocations represented by the first 2 seals. This active interference in all aspects of economic activity will be one of the key means which will be employed by Antichrist to tighten his grip on power through strict controls on all spheres of commerce, and also to earmark the lion's share of production for the exclusive use of his followers as a means of reward. The notorious extension of this strategy in the tribulation's second half to religious persecution is well known, Revelation 13:16 through 18. As the color associated with starvation, black is most fitting to symbolize the trend of scarcity represented by the third horseman, Job 30:30, and Lamentations 4:8 and 9 and 5:10. By any estimate, the prices quoted here are extreme. The ratio of the value of barley to wheat is consistent with what we know of ancient pricing, but the prices themselves indicate that the average employed person of that time will need all of his or her income for subsistence. A denarius represents the standard day's pay for a working man, but a quart or liter of milled flour, roughly the equivalent in nutritive value to 3 times its weight in unprocessed barley, will barely suffice for an individual, let alone a family. Therefore, we are to see in these prophetic words control of wages and control of prices, limiting radically and artificially the consumption of all who are not on Antichrist's team. The phrase, "And see thou hurt not the oil and wine," is often misunderstood. The command is directed to the prospective buyer, not to the horseman, and suggests that for the average person who is not part of Antichrist's privileged few, anything beyond the most basic and essential staples will be priced out of reach, so much so that there will not even be any need to be on the lookout for a good price, because they will never be in range, as long as Antichrist's kingdom endures. It must also be said here that the black horse is not mere dearth, but control by design of production, prices, distribution, capital, etc. Although famine has always been with us on this planet, and its intensification is indeed a sign and a characteristic of the tribulation, Matthew 24:7, the trend depicted here is, once again, a man-made one, an outrageous and untenable economic situation brought on by Antichrist's policies. For just as communist and fascist regimes redistribute wealth upon ascension to power, that is, engage in theft on an almost unimaginable scale, so it will be in the case of Antichrist, and we fully expect his activities to surpass even the horrendous historical examples of the past 100 years. Therefore, the scales in the hand of the third horseman are a weapon of economic control and torment, equivalent to the first horseman's bow for accomplishing devious conquests, and the second horseman's sword for fomenting internal insurrection. This deliberate and artificial system of rationing and price controls will no doubt seem appealing to many at first, but it will soon promote horrendous scarcity for all but the rich and privileged followers of Antichrist. The pale green horse accelerated mortality. Revelation 6:7 and 8. And when he, that is the Lamb, opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature saying, Come and see. And I looked, and behold, there was a pale green horse, and the one who was sitting upon it was named Death, and Hades followed with him. The pale green horse symbolizes the trend of a monumental increase in the incidence of death. The reference to Hades, the place of the unbelieving dead, following closely and immediately after death, is a vivid symbol of the intensification and rapidity of tribulational mortality, that is, with no space or lag at all between the coming of death and internment in Hades. This expansion and acceleration of the rate of mortality will result from a variety of factors, specifically the war, revolution, and famine of the preceding three horseman trends. As the color of decay and putrefaction, pale green is a natural choice to represent death and its corruption. It must be emphasized here that the pale green horse does not merely represent the increasing number of deaths resulting from the wars, insurrections, and economic scarcities represented by the first three horsemen, but an expansion of mortality in its own right, resulting from the cheapness with which Antichrist will treat the lives of his subjects. For a large element in elevating this trend of mortality to levels so far not yet seen in the history of the world, since the Great Flood will again be deliberate policy choices on the part of Antichrist. In addition to the deaths and degradation of health brought on by the trends of the first three horsemen, the rider on the pale green horse represents death in his own right. For we may expect Antichrist, in his zeal for world conquest, given the nearly unlimited means required for such a course of action, to redirect resources from all of life's essential areas, namely medicine, law, and order, beyond mere martial control, and environmental protection. The resultant expansion in plague and disease, crime, and environmental hazards, coupled, of course, with the contributions of the first three horsemen, will greatly increase both the risk and the incidence of mortality for all but the very few. In a sick way, this expanded mortality rate, hitting hardest the young, the old, and the infirm, will also accomplish Antichrist's bidding by eliminating consumption by non-productive members of society. We can be relatively sure, therefore, that the ultimate effect of this massive redirection of resources from health, safety, and environmental sectors will not be unanticipated by Antichrist or unwanted. Just as the bow, sword, and scales represent weapons whereby Antichrist furthers his self-serving trends, so also in the same way Hades, mentioned here, must be seen as a tool for accomplishing his satanic objectives, in this case the freeing up of resources by death for his megalomaniacal purposes.